So, no, I wouldn't say I have a passion for HR.
Welcome back to Human Resources for the People. It's a human capital revolution. A fun fact about Australian labour law is that it includes a national minimum wage that is set by the Fair Work Commission each year. This minimum wage is designed to ensure that all workers in Australia receive a fair and decent standard of living. The minimum wage is typically adjusted annually to reflect changes in the cost of living and economic conditions. What makes this system unique is that Australia has a safety net approach to the minimum wage. This means that the minimum wage is not a fixed dollar amount, but rather a benchmark that is set to provide a minimum standard of living for workers. The Fair Work Commission considers various factors such as economic conditions, social needs, and relative living standards when determining the appropriate minimum wage. Well, that's not that fun, but here comes fun. It's Let's Hire Someone in Australia. It's part of our long running series that we have on this channel where we go over labor laws throughout the United States. This article comes to us from Lexology, link down below if you'd like to check it out. And this article is written by People Cultural Strategies author Joydeep Kaur. Let's try saying that one on YouTube. Let's look right into it. Let's get going. So one of the biggest things is there's no legislative scheme giving preference in hiring, but they can, of course, encourage applications for members of disadvantaged groups. This is similar to the United States. This is if an employer seeks to restrict recruitment to a designated group, they have to have a special measure or positive discrimination under relevant anti-discrimination legislation. So it is possible that you can recruit and discriminate. And they can also seek an exemption from the application of specific anti-discrimination legislation. In the United States, you can have bona fide occupational qualifications that allow you to discriminate in the United States. It typically takes the form of a church. For example, churches have the right to hire pastors that believe the same religion as them, although that is discrimination. There are other BFOQs out there that exist, but predominantly it looks like religion and religious leadership. The Fair Work Commission in Australia guarantees that employers cannot take adverse actions based on race, gender, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing I find interesting is that it prohibits employers from taking that adverse action from political opinion or social origin. Those are different from the United States. Political opinion does exist as a protected class in many states. And then I believe social origin, if I imagine that's specifically surrounding the caste system, and that was almost banned in the discrimination against social origin or lower caste was almost banned in California just recently, but Newsom vetoed it, and it is banned in several different cities throughout the country, including Urbana-Champaign, I believe Seattle, and a few others. They can do physicals, but only when there's a legislative requirement. This is contrasted completely with the United States, where there is no particular legislation surrounding medical examination. There are many industries that require it for various reasons, but you can do medical exams. However, if you discriminate on the basis of disability or something of that nature, that's where you get into hot water in the United States. You can drug test in Australia, which is actually kind of surprising. I'm surprised that they allow just blanket drug testing where necessary. I get the impression that probably very few employers drug test in the workplace in Australia, but it is allowed. And if there's a strict testing regime, employers can refuse to hire employees who do not submit to a test. Unlike the United States, Australia has pretty limited view on background checks. Of course, you can do them, especially when they're, for example, when you're working with vulnerable individuals or if you're working in a police officer role. But generally speaking, or when there's, honesty, integrity, like banking or something of that nature. But for the most part, it appears that background checks are mostly banned in Australia, and as a result, is significantly different in the United States, where there's a patchwork of federal and state laws. But for the most part, people can be background checked when they're entering in employment in the United States, of course. I prefer the Australian system much more to the United States. It's important to do this. But on the flip side, the United States does it partially to limit their liability. Of course, if you hire, for example, a sex offender and you have them working in a group of vulnerable people, that can open the company up to a lot of liability, and that's where American labor law typically gets involved. There doesn't appear to be any, at least national, push on recruitment agencies, specifically surrounding legislation and control of those recruitment agencies. And I find that to be interesting. I find that, generally speaking, the recruitment agencies of post-colonial, of colonial powers, they're heavily regulated and heavily controlled. That's just my own perspective from looking at laws all across the world. But comparatively to the United States, where there is almost no restrictions, there's no licensing regimes or anything of that nature, certainly, and there's very little control other than sort of contract law, as
What
far
do
as
you
I can
think
tell.
about today's video?
So that's
Please
it. Thank you
comment
for
down
joining me on
below.
this exploration
Like,
of the beautiful
share, and
country of
subscribe. It really
Australia.
helps out.
Like, share, and
And I'll see
subscribe,
you
and
on
we'll
the
see you on the
next
next
one.
video. Bye,
Bye,
guys.
guys.